The winner is John Wayne in True Blood.
There are stars, and then there are legends. John Wayne was something else entirely. He was an institution. For nearly 5 decades, he dominated Hollywood screens, playing soldiers, lawmen, cowboys, and heroes with a presence so magnetic that audiences never quite looked away. He was the Duke. He was America's man. But here's the thing about John Wayne that most people never fully appreciated while he was alive. The man wasn't just building career. He was building an empire. Quietly, carefully, and with the same iron discipline he brought to every role he ever played, John Wayne was stacking wealth, acquiring assets, and laying the groundwork for a financial legacy that would outlast him by generations. When he passed away in June of 1979, the full picture of what he had accumulated left Hollywood speechless. His fortune was massive. His planning was meticulous. And the family he left behind? They didn't just inherit money. They inherited a dynasty. This is a story of how John Wayne built his wealth, protected it through crisis, lost pieces of it along the way, and ultimately secured a legacy so powerful that his name still generates millions of dollars every single year, long after credits rolled on his final film. To understand how John Wayne built his fortune, you have to go back to the very beginning, back to a small town in Iowa, back to 1907, back to a boy named Marion Robert Morrison. Marion was born into a modest household. His father worked hard, his mother kept the family together, and life in Winnisett, Iowa, was simple and honest. There was no silver spoon, no inheritance, no safety net. The Morrison family knew the value of a dollar because every dollar was earned through real effort. That early reality, growing up without excess, watching his parents stretch every cent, planted something deep inside Marion, a hunger, a drive, an understanding that nothing valuable comes without sacrifice. When Marion was still a young boy, the family relocated to Glendale, California, chasing better opportunities under the warm western sun. It was there that Marion picked up the nickname that would follow him for life, Duke, named after his loyal Airedale Terrier. The boy who would become John Wayne first learned what it meant to carry a name with pride. Duke wasn't just a nickname. It was an identity. And Marion Morrison wore it like armor. In high school, Duke thrived on the football field. He was big, coordinated, aggressive in the best possible way, and talented enough to earn a scholarship to University of Southern California. For a kid from a working-class background, that scholarship felt like a rocket ship to another world. He dreamed of athletic glory, of building a life through sport. But life, as it often does, had other plans. A serious injury during a college game ended his football career before it truly began. For most young men, that kind of setback would have been devastating. A door slammed shut with no visible replacement. But Duke didn't fall apart. He looked around, assessed his options, and kept moving forward. That resilience, that absolute refusal to accept defeat, will become a defining quality of everything John Wayne ever accomplished, on screen and off. In 1926, a former coach helped Duke land a behind-the-scenes job at Fox Film Corporation. He wasn't an actor yet. He was a prop mover, a set hand, a young man doing whatever needed to be done. But Duke paid attention. He watched how the whole operation worked, how directors commanded their sets, how studios managed their stars, how deals were structured, and where the real money flowed. Most young men in that position would have been happy just to have a paycheck. Duke was taking notes. It was during this period that he met director John Ford, a connection that would reshape the entire trajectory of his life. Ford saw something in Duke that others overlooked, a physical authority, a natural confidence, an almost gravitational presence that cameras would eventually love. The friendship they formed during those early years became one of the most important professional relationships in Hollywood history. Duke's first real brush with the camera was humble to say the least. Herding geese in a 1928 film called Mother Machree. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the stuff of legend, but it put him in front of the lens, and that was all he needed. By 1930, the studio machinery had given Marion Morrison a new identity. Director Raoul Walsh cast him in a major western called The Big Trail, and decided the name Marion Morrison simply didn't carry enough weight for the kind of rugged hero they were selling. And so John Wayne was born. The name was strong. It sounded like something carved out of granite. It fit the man they wanted him to project, and in many ways, it fit the man he was becoming. The Big Trail, however, was a commercial disappointment. New filming technology meant many theaters couldn't even show it properly, and the investment didn't pay off at the box office. Wayne found himself back at square one, a name without a hit to back it up. What followed was nearly a decade of low-budget westerns, small productions, and modest paychecks. But Wayne never stopped. He showed up, learned his craft, developed his signature style, and waited for his moment. That moment arrived in 1939 with Stagecoach. John Ford directed it. John Wayne starred in it. An entire film industry sat up and took notice. Stagecoach wasn't just a hit. It was a phenomenon. It received 7 Academy Award nominations and transformed John Wayne from a working actor into a genuine star. From that point forward, his career followed an upward trajectory that almost never wavered. Through the 1940s and 1950s and into the 1960s, Wayne worked constantly, commanding bigger salaries with every passing year. He starred in She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, Red River, The Searchers, Rio Grande, and Sands of Iwo Jima, a film that earned him his first Academy Award nomination. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore. He was a war hero, a lawman, a moral compass on screen. He played men who stood for something, and audiences responded with loyalty that bordered on devotion. As his star power grew, so did his salary negotiations. Wayne became increasingly savvy about how he structured his deals. He didn't just take flat fees. He negotiated for percentages of profits, for back-end participation, for ownership stakes in the films he made. This was not the norm for actors of his era. Most stars took their paycheck and moved on. Wayne understood that the real money wasn't the acting. It was in the ownership. That insight, developed and refined over years of watching how studios operated, would eventually be worth far more than any single paycheck he ever received. The crowning achievement of his acting career came in 1969 when he won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his performance in True Grit. He played Rooster Cogburn, a one-eyed, whiskey-soaked U.S. Marshal with a hard exterior and a complicated heart. It was a departure from his usual noble hero archetype, and it proved beyond any remaining doubt that John Wayne wasn't just a movie star. He was an actor of genuine ability. At 62 years old, he stood on that stage and accepted Hollywood's highest honor. It was a culmination of 40 years of work. But the road to that kind of wealth and achievement was never smooth. John Wayne made enormous amounts of money throughout his career, and he lost enormous amounts of it too. Twice, in fact, his financial situation became so dire that the man who had become one of the most recognizable faces on the planet was nearly bankrupt. The first major disaster unfolded in the 1950s. Wayne had placed his financial affairs entirely in the hands of a business manager named Bo Roos. He trusted Roos completely, handed over full control, and focused on making movies. It was a mistake that cost him dearly. Roos convinced Wayne to invest in a business venture in Panama that turned out to be essentially a fraud. Wayne lost $700,000 in that single deal, a staggering amount for the era. Additional connected investments bled out another $1 million on top of that. In total, Wayne was left holding losses that would have destroyed most people. He had been one of Hollywood's highest-paid stars, and he was nearly wiped out. But instead of collapsing, Wayne rebuilt. He fired Roos, took back control of his finances, and began educating himself. He started reading contracts. He asked hard questions. He brought in advisors he trusted but never again surrendered total control to any single person. He selected projects deliberately, films that would pay well and advance his image rather than risky artistic experiments. Slowly, steadily, he climbed back. Then, almost unbelievably, it happened again. This time, the person who mismanaged his money was a family member, his oldest daughter's husband, Donald LaCava. Wayne had extended trust to him precisely because he was family. That trust was misplaced. LaCava made poor financial decisions, mishandled funds, and allowed bills to pile up without Wayne's knowledge. The moment Wayne realized how bad things had gotten came when he received an unpaid bill from Saks Fifth Avenue, a $3,500 charge that had simply never been addressed. For a man of his stature and income, it was humiliating. More than that, It was a signal that something was deeply wrong. Wayne responded decisively. La Cava was removed from any financial responsibility. Wayne tightened his control even further and became meticulous about tracking every dollar that came in and every dollar that went out. He learned from two expensive, painful lessons, and he never forgot them. While Wayne was rebuilding his finances and churning out hit after hit, his body was fighting battles that the public knew very little about. In 1956, he filmed The Conqueror near St. George, Utah, a location that would later become infamous. The U.S. government had conducted nuclear weapons tests in the Nevada desert not far from that filming location, and radioactive dust had settled into the surrounding region. No one on the production was aware of the danger. They worked in that environment for weeks. Out of roughly 220 cast and crew members who worked on that film, 91 were eventually diagnosed with cancer, and 46 of them died from the disease. The statistical anomaly was impossible to ignore, and many connected it directly to the radiation exposure on that set. In 1964, Wayne was diagnosed with lung cancer. Decades of heavy smoking had taken their toll. Surgeons removed an entire lung and several ribs in a procedure that should have killed him. Wayne recovered. Not only did he survive, he returned to work and kept making films. He spoke publicly about his diagnosis at a time when cancer was still widely stigmatized, encouraging people to get checked and to take their health seriously. He turned his private battle into a public message. Years later, stomach cancer arrived. Another fight, another grueling battle. Wayne handled it with the same quiet, stubborn endurance that characterized everything else he did. His final film, The Shootist, released in 1976, cast him as a legendary gunfighter dying of cancer, choosing how to face the end of his life with dignity. It was a role that mirrored his real circumstances almost precisely. Many people who watched it understood, on some level, that they were watching John Wayne say goodbye. He died on June 11, 1979, at the age of 72. The cancer had finally won. But the man it claimed had spent his final years not retreating. He had spent them making sure everything he had built would survive him. When the details of John Wayne's estate became public after his death, the numbers were significant. His estate was valued at approximately $7 million at the time, a figure that translates to somewhere in the range of $25 million in today's money. He owned multiple properties, including land in Arizona and Washington state. He held financial interests and investments. He had assets that went well beyond the obvious. His will was crafted with the precision and intentionality of a man who had learned his financial lessons the hard way. Every decision in that document reflected a deliberate choice. His 7 children from his marriages each received portions of the estate, provided for in specific ways that reflected their individual circumstances and relationships with their father. His first wife, Josephine, who had been out of his life for decades by the time he died, was included. Wayne established a trust fund that provided her with regular monthly payments, an acknowledgement of shared history, and an act of genuine decency toward a woman who had been part of his earlier life. 2 of his longtime personal secretaries, women who had worked beside him for years and proven their loyalty through every phase of his career, were each given substantial gifts of tens of thousands of dollars. Wayne understood that loyalty was rare and that it deserved recognition. His third wife, Pilar Palit, was excluded from the will entirely, but that exclusion wasn't a slight. It was simply the legal reality of a prior financial agreement the two had signed. They had been living separate lives for years before his death, and the settlement they had arranged meant her financial security had already been addressed. The most striking provision in the entire will, however, involved Donald La Cava, the man who had mishandled Wayne's finances years earlier. Wayne made certain, in writing, with legal precision, that La Cava would never have access to any portion of his daughter's inheritance. Not directly, not indirectly, not under any circumstance. If Wayne's daughter were to pass away before spending her inheritance, the money would flow to her children or whoever she designated. But La Cava would never touch a single dollar of it. It was a final reckoning, a message written in legal language that left absolutely no room for interpretation. What happened to John Wayne's fortune after 1979 is, in many ways, even more remarkable than how he accumulated it. His children understood what they had inherited, and they treated it with appropriate seriousness. His oldest son, Michael Wayne, became a producer and took an active role in managing and protecting the family's entertainment legacy. Patrick Wayne followed his father into acting and built his own career in films. Isa Wayne became a vocal keeper of her father's memory, sharing personal stories and helping new generations understand who John Wayne actually was as a man, not just as an icon. John Ethan Wayne took an active role in protecting the family brand. Melinda and Marissa Wayne each contributed to the family's ongoing business interests in their own ways. The family eventually formed John Wayne Enterprises, a company specifically designed to manage and monetize the Wayne legacy. This entity oversees everything connected to his name and image: licensing agreements, merchandise, appearances of his likeness, partnerships with brands that align with the values he represented. Every poster, every branded product, every item that carries John Wayne's face or name generates revenue that flows through that enterprise. The John Wayne Cancer Foundation, established in 1985 by his family, carries forward his public battle against a disease that ultimately claimed him. The organization raises millions of dollars for cancer research and awareness, turning the most painful chapter of his life into something that has helped countless others. And then there is the sheer cultural staying power of his films. Stagecoach, True Grit, The Searchers, Rio Bravo, these aren't just old movies. They are continuously licensed, streamed, broadcast, and sold around the world. Every time someone watches a John Wayne film, somewhere in the financial chain, a payment flows back to his estate. His grandchildren have grown up with both the privilege and the responsibility of carrying the Wayne name, and many of them are actively involved in the enterprises that continue to grow his legacy. John Wayne died with $7 million in assets and a name that was already legendary. But what he actually left behind was something far more valuable than any dollar figure. He left behind a blueprint. He showed his family what it looked like to build something from nothing. He showed them what it cost. In sweat, in failure, in painful lessons learned twice when one should have been enough. He showed them how to protect what they had earned, how to recognize betrayal and respond to it with clarity rather than bitterness, and how to plan for the future even when the present was uncertain. He also showed them, through his will, that legacy is about values as much as it is about money. He rewarded loyalty. He protected his children. He excluded those who had proven themselves untrustworthy. He used the final legal document of his life as a precise reflection of the man he had spent 72 years becoming. Today, John Wayne Enterprises continues to grow. His face appears on merchandise sold around the world. His films are watched by new audiences who weren't alive when he made them. His foundation funds cancer research in his name. And his family, the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Mary and Robert Morrison from Winterset, Iowa, live comfortably on the strength of what he built. The Duke is gone, but the empire he built, that is still very much alive. And judging by how carefully he constructed it, it looks like it was built to last forever.